So I guess I only have 25 minutes of recording time left. That's pretty crazy. Um, so I'll have to get on and find out if I can delete some of my son's videos of his Legos. Or I can get out my other phone that also I can record on. But let's see. So kind of, my dad was a little bit better, kind of, for a while, but and it's a little unclear. I don't know what was going on in my mom's mind, but to me and my doctor sister, who was technically older than me, but I was now taller than her, we always felt like it had been a mistake for them to get back together. And I guess what I can say is my dad was super stressed out about where we went to college and what we were planning to major in, when we're still in 11th grade or whatever. And so he basically only wanted us to go to BYU because, as you know, BYU is the best value in higher education. At least if you're if you have the whole Mormon deal where you get the discount because you pay tithing. It's like being at a state school and having in-state tuition. It's basically equivalent to that. Like if you are a observant Mormon and you're going to BYU, then you have a discount equivalent to if you were an in-state student at a state school. Anyway, so even though we would go and interview at places like the Naval Academy or UVA, or my older sister, number one sister, she interviewed with Northwestern. They all wound up going to BYU. And my doctor sister, she fought this really hard with him. And being her and him, them both having these devil personalities, they would fight really hard. And I guess that was kind of the beginning of me being very conflict averse. And that also went with me trying to model myself on my mother's sanguine personality. And the other thing was, my horoscope was I was year of the dog, but then my white horoscope was Gemini. So I kind of had that alternating personalities thing going on too. But yeah, I don't know. But so things started getting really weird at a certain point there. For some reason, my parents were living in two separate houses. And I may be confused about the timeline on this, but for some reason, the brother just younger than me, who was the first person in our family to self-diagnose with autism, and this hadn't happened yet. He did that in his 30s. But when he was still in school, for some reason, my mom felt like he was being persecuted by his school teacher. So along with Santa Claus and Christmas, I also refused to see any value in public school teachers. Because my mom had this situation where she felt like my brother was being persecuted by his public school teacher. Okay, so public school. A little background on this is that my siblings were, generally speaking, all in the magnet school for people who had a genius level IQ. And they were still developing the program at the time that my two oldest siblings went through, but whatever. So it didn't really become an issue until they were in middle school. But when Nancy got there, they were putting people in third grade. And so Nancy, sorry. doctor sister got in third grade, and so when I got to third grade, they tested me, and I didn't get in third grade. And so even though I got in fourth grade, it became this thing that I was only barely a genius. I thought part of the problem was when I went in to take the IQ test, my older siblings all tried to prep me for it. And I felt like that was cheating, and I didn't want to get caught cheating, and so I deliberately did kind of some haphazard answers. The one question I remember is, if you've lost your wallet in a baseball field, draw the path that you would do to try to find the wallet. And so like I went around the outside once, but rather than doing a grid like my siblings told me I should do, I just kind of did this haphazard, like, spider web on LSD pattern. And then I ended the question. And it's possible that actually reflects that I have a low persistence tolerance at that time in my life, but some learned helplessness, as I would hear it described when I got to college. So, yeah. But that's the other thing about me, is I have an intact chain of memory going back to when I'm 2 years old. And so if people ever tell me that there may have been something that I blocked, that was very threatening to my self-concept. At least this is me as a when I say young adult, I mean an adult younger than 30, and not an adult who's actually an adolescent, which is how young adult is used in my culture of the Mormon Church. Anyway, I'll go ahead and explain here that I got my first bachelor's degree in linguistics. And so a lot of what I'm talking about is the nosology of mental illness diagnosis. And so, how do I say this? Like, I have saying what things are and what they aren't and how they might overlap, to me is, if you can imagine that I'm somebody who speaks sentence diagramming as a first language, that might kind of give you an idea into what I mean when I say things don't really matter. I love the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, not just because it had Asian people in it, although the Asian people were very nice and the hot dog fingers were disgusting, and I love everything bagels, but because of the two meanings of the expression nothing matters. Because, certainly nothing matters because everything is chaos, but also nothing matters enough to want to stop living because of it, Nothing matters. Anyway, I loved that. And so I guess what I'm getting at here is semantic ambiguity, syntactic ambiguity. I actually, even just the other day, found a new expression for a kind of a syntactic trick called I think it was called a mule sentence. And I can't even remember what it means anymore, but it's just funny that I think, it's easy to say when you're a kid, oh, being an expert means that you never stop asking questions, and it actually means that you don't know everything, but it really kind of is that. But anyway, I forget why I decided to stop and start talking about linguistics for a second, but anyway, I know that I was in there somewhere talking about my parents. I got back together, and my dad would fight with my sister, and I didn't want to have any of that. And long story short with that is I wound up going to the U of U instead of BYU. And I guess I'm still kind of anti-BYU. I'm into not liking BYU. And not in the way most people are who went to the U of U where there's like the rivalry. It's like, I put a lot of thought into this. I guess, yeah. Anyway. So, my sister is in 12th grade and I'm in 10th grade, I guess. Oh, my dad, my brother, so 5 of 9, he was being persecuted by his teacher. And usually if you failed in the magnet program for geniuses, that he should have like gone to 4th grade in non-magnet school. But they decided to make an exception per the teacher's preference and have him repeat 3rd grade in the magnet program with the same effing teacher, okay? And this kind of led to, so we know he eventually would self-diagnose with autism, but people couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And my mom would take him to therapy, and the therapist thought he was great because he could talk and tell her about all the interesting books he was reading. In addition to Christmas, I hated reading, so I didn't read very much because this was one area where I chose to differentiate myself from my mother, because my mother was a compulsive reader, and I didn't believe in reading for whatever reason at that point in my life. I got over it somewhat sooner than all my other issues that I had. But I think it was I didn't like being forced to read for school, and I didn't read very much for pleasure, or else I would read the same books over and over. So like I would read the Little House on the Prairie series over and over, and I would read King of the Wind over and over and over, and I would read the Narnia books. Did I already say Narnia books, or did I say the Little House on the Prairie books? Anyway, yeah, there was no Harry Potter back then, or I'm sure I would have read that over and over and over. But yeah, that, I guess one particular thing was that my mom read Orson Scott Card, and I was not going to read Orson Scott Card for a while yet there. Anyway, all I can say is it was just some like irrational dislike that I had adopted as part of my self-concept. And my mom would just go and check out a whole grocery bag full of books from the library and read them in a week, and then go back and do it again, and she just like always had her nose in a book. And oddly, I mean, this was something else that her mother, my white grandmother, the double one, she also said that reading was an immense waste of time, even though she herself had been an English teacher, but she felt like you should be reading War and Peace and Crime and Punishment and, not necessarily Russian novels, but received literature and not Zane Grey or science fiction, pulp, dime fiction, because my white grandpa really liked to read Westerns. And anyway, I don't know if I want to talk about their relationship at this point, but anyway, my mom thought my grandpa was a really nice person, but I didn't think he was, because he wasn't observant member of the Mormon church. Like, he had been baptized when he was a little kid, but he didn't do any of the Mormon stuff, and he actually like smoked and drank coffee. I don't remember ever being around when he drank alcohol, but I think that's more of just like people who drink alcohol don't drink alcohol when they're around their grandkids. Anyway, but I know he smoked until he had lung cancer at some point and stuff like that. So I thought, well, he's not Mormon, how can he be a nice person? But my mom thought he was a nice person, and she had us sing Each Life That Touches Ours for Good at his funeral. I don't remember if we sang anything at my grandma's funeral. And none of that would happen until I was almost 40, because that was kind of the weird thing, is that none of my grandparents died until they were in their 90s. But yeah. So my brother went to live with my dad, and he kind of got in this situation where people were trying to figure out why he didn't want to succeed in school, even though he was obviously very intelligent, and high-functioning autism wasn't a thing yet. And I mean, jumping back just a tad, when I was in 6th grade, I was going to the magnet school, and they brought autistic classrooms in to help fill up the classroom, because the reason the magnet school was held in this particular school building is because the neighborhood didn't have the demographic of having children in it anymore. So they needed to have more space taken up in this school building, and they had people with autism, which at that time was almost always nonverbal and not able to regulate. Okay, and this is back in 1982. Every classroom had what would now be popularly known as a chokey in the corner. It didn't have nails in it like in Matilda, but it was a timeout booth, you know, with a big metal lock on the outside. But, you know, it was like something that they allowed back in that day and age, even in Fairfax County, which is supposedly a really good school system. But, you know, just having children living at home and then coming to school rather than being in a mental institution was, I guess, progress. So that was my original formulation of autism, was these kids where you could only have 5 of them in a classroom with 2 adults, and they might just scream and hurt themselves and things like that. Like so as a 6th grader, they read to us a story about somebody working in special ed who wanted to go and work with the autistic people and some of their experiences, and one of them involved a child who was looking at his distorted reflection in a Mylar sheet and started clawing at his face. And that just was terrifying to me, and whatever human interest core that involved this special educator getting meaning from this experience was utterly lost on me. Anyway, because it just sounded terrifying. And it's funny because, I mean, obviously all my friends that I went to nursing school with who were like, you want to go into psych? Similar deal. Anyway, they all wanted to go work with moms and babies, and so as we'll move forward, I guess, I think we're probably done with the birth order, family pattern, goodness of fit. I guess I can talk a little bit more about goodness of fit, temperament, and personality disorder that I think really characterized my adolescence. I guess I will say with goodness of fit that, so there wasn't a good fit between my doctor sister and my mom. And it's hard to know things I try to sort out in my own life. It's like, is there just not a good fit between all of my adult children and my husband's personality, or is he just really a bad person? And I mean, flash forward, we were legally separated in 2017, and then we got back together, and then we got separated again in 2019, and I actually moved into my own apartment for a while, and then we wound up getting back together. So, you know, which I know that past me would have been extraordinarily disappointed to hear about that happening, but you know, we'll get there if we get there. But to know that for whatever reason, the way that my mom could communicate love or approval for this child that would become a doctor didn't match. It didn't mesh well. And you know, the great thing about Everything Everywhere All at Once is it gives that kind of, like, if you could say one had a double personality, the other had a Jesus personality, that obviously Wayman has the Jesus personality, and you know, I don't think it's the case that she ever stopped having that personality, but Evelyn had the kind of the devil personality, the optimizing personality, as my husband describes it for himself. Because yes, I married a devil. So I think I've talked enough about my adolescence, and that we can probably stop this one and move on to that.